Good evening and welcome to Economics 330, Global Trade and Political Economy at the City University of New York, MAC. My name is O. Felix Obi, and I will be your professor for the class. And this is, of course, our first lecture and office hour for the fall 2025 semester. And today is Tuesday, August 26th, 2025. Let us quickly address a few housekeeping matters before beginning our formal lecture. Kindly pay particular attention to dates for this week's assessments, as I have posted on the class's electronic board, Brightspace. Looking ahead, please note that your midterm will be a term paper. Of course, that's weeks away. Office hour and lecture will be on Tuesdays by 6 p.m. and right here on Zoom. As I did for this office hour, I would always share the announcement with the Zoom link on the class Brightspace page. This is an asynchronous class, so attendance is encouraged, but optional. I will, however, endeavor to post Zoom lecture videos on the class Brightspace page so that those with conflicting schedule will have the opportunity to watch the lecture. Please also note that you are required to turn on your camera at least once during office hour lecture to confirm your identity and maintain academic integrity, among other reasons. Please look out for office hour lecture announcements on Mondays, except holidays, as was the case yesterday, or no school days, with a Zoom link. You may not share the class Zoom link with anyone who is not enrolled in this class. Let me emphasize that again. You may not, which means you should not, share the class Zoom link with anyone who is not enrolled in this class. Weekly assessment will open on Mondays, except holidays, again, as was the case yesterday, by 12:01 a.m. Please endeavor to read and familiarize yourself with the class syllables, including where it clearly states that there will be no makeup work. Repeat, there will be no makeup work. And all assignments must be submitted on time and through Brightspace. Again, let me repeat that. Endeavor to read and familiarize yourself with the class syllables, including where the syllabus clearly states that there will be no makeup work and that all assignments must be submitted on time and through Brightspace. So you may not email your assignment to me, and you most certainly are not going to be able to turn in a late assignment, and there'll be no makeup work for missed assignment. Kindly also note that all assignments will require the practice of rigorous writing, good grammar, complete sentences, and complete ideas with minimal spelling or structural syntactic errors. You are advised to take the homework assignments seriously. Let's now circle back to broader fundamentals. This course is designed to provide you with analytical tools essential for understanding the complex reality of politics and policy making as they relate to international trade, trade relations, and trade relations among nations. To achieve our course objectives, You will be assigned readings in contemporary and historical discussions of trade policies in the USA, in foreign countries, and in international forums such as the World Trade Organization, the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation, OECD, the World Bank Group, the United Nations, and especially the International Monetary Fund. You will also analyze complex as well as simple issues that relate to the philosophical and practical conflicts that impact on trade relations and economic development nationally and internationally. We will begin by explaining the role of trade among nations and in the USA. We will then discuss politics and how it affects policymaking, an area of public interest, and with regard to trade in particular. While there are conflicts between policy proposals and implementation, there are global and national institutions established to facilitate trade and reduce sources of conflict in international trade. In many ways, there could not be a more crucial time in history to study global trade and political economy than now. So you should be excited as me to interrogate these issues. To understand the conflicts better, the class will also lay some foundation in political theory as they relate to international trade relations and domestic conflicts regarding trade. We will close with specific international institutions that are cited as the cause of existing conflicts and frictions in domestic and international trade relations. We will conclude the semester by discussing possible recommendations for solutions to present and potential future sources of conflict, and this should prove very interesting. It is helpful to know that we will achieve our course objectives by mastering the learning objectives for each module. That said, our learning objectives for this week, our Module 1, are to develop a foundational knowledge for the study of global trade and political economy. As such, the first objective is to say, what is international trade and why is trade among nations beneficial? International trade is the purchase and sale of goods and services by companies or consumers in different countries. These may include consumer goods, raw materials, food, and machinery, which are all bought and sold in the international marketplace. Trade among nations is beneficial because the commerce allows countries to expand their markets and access goods and services that they otherwise may not have been available domestically. Think about how to keep it, and one of the things that I try to do with this class is to minimize the abstract nature of the class discussions and to relate it, to always make an effort to relate it to real life scenarios. Think about the convenience of walking into the grocery store and we're able to purchase fruits that are out of season. This is the benefit of international trade because these are fruits that many of them cannot grow in our climate. And some of them that are able to grow in our climate may be out of season, but we're able to enjoy these fruits 12 months a year. Another clear benefit, of course, would be, I don't know, vanilla ice cream, because vanilla certainly does not grow in the United States, but yet we don't have a shortage of food items that have vanilla in it. So all this happens as a result of international trade. And of course, they also make the market more competitive. This ultimately results in more competitive pricing and thus brings cheaper products to consumers. Some countries engage in international trade by treating imported goods the same as those produced domestically. Of course, that is also happening less often given the trade tensions that the international system is currently experiencing. The second learning objective is how does the US economy benefit from international trade and investment? The United States is the world's largest economy and the largest exporter and importer of goods and services. International trade is critical to America's prosperity because it fuels economic growth, supporting good jobs at home, raising living standards, and helping Americans provide for their families with affordable goods and services. Put differently, the US economy, all things being equal, benefits from international trade and investment by creating jobs, boosting economic growth, increasing access to a wider variety of goods and services at potentially lower prices, promoting efficiency through specialization, and allowing companies to compete on a global scale. Ultimately, strengthening the overall US economy by expanding market reach and generating additional revenue through exports. On the productivity side of the economy, expanding trade allows production inputs such as labor and capital to be used more efficiently, which raises overall productivity. US businesses that grow in response to increased market access abroad support additional job opportunities. Global competitive pressures mean that these firms are typically more productive and rely more on capital and skilled worker on average than similar non-exporting firms. While on the consumption side of the economy, international trade helps US households' budgets go further because our trading partners also specialize in the goods and services for which they are relatively more productive. The prices of those goods and services in the United States are lower than if we could only consume what we produce. Trade also offers a much greater diversity of consumption opportunities, from year-round fresh fruits to affordable clothing. In fact, research estimates that the variety of imported goods increased approximately threefold between 1972 and 2001. This increase in variety provides US consumers with value equivalent of 2.6% of gross domestic product. According to other estimates, the reduction in US tariffs prior since World War II contributed an additional 7.3% to US GDP, or approximately 1.3 trillion as far back as 10 years ago in 2014. Distributed equally, this translates to an additional over $10,000 in per American household income. Now, let me also mention that throughout this class, there are phrases and concepts that I'm going to ask that you make a notation of, because this phrasing and concepts allow you to better understand our subject matter, be a better subject matter expert. They also signal to whatever audience you interact with that you have a technical grasp of the subject matter. So they have a positive signaling effect. One of those phrases that I'd like to mention, I'd like you to make a notation of, is dialectical thinking. That is, to understand an issue very well, you have to see it from all sides. So there is the push and pull, for instance, when it comes to international trade. If, for instance, you work for an American company that has grown its export market, that's on balance objectively a good thing. More than likely, there is going to be more revenue for the company, which may result in more bonus or increased paycheck. So that is on the one hand. If you're also, on the other hand, if you work for a company that cannot make whatever goods or services that it typically produces competitively, you might be priced out by more competitively priced imports. For that individual worker, of course, that is not going to be good news in the immediate fact because they're likely going to be unemployed. However, on the consumption side, if you're a consumer and you're going to purchase or consume this product or service that is now being imported, all things being equal, because there is a competitive advantage between the company that imports to the United States and our domestic company, you're more likely going to enjoy competitive pricing, aka cheaper pricing. Again, these arguments are best made with the phrase on balance, the benefits outweigh the shortcomings. But you want to be able to understand the entire issue in its entirety. Obviously, this is an oversimplification exercise that I've just briefly gone through. And as the semester progresses, we'll begin to unpack the logic and the arguments and the theories that undergird and underpin and inform these positions. And hopefully you'll walk away from this class being a better authority on the subject of global trade and political economy. Having said that, the third learning objective is, though trade is beneficial, why then is there conflict within and among nations regarding trade? Which is a good segue. And there has not been any more conflict than now in recent trading history, or at least since the post-World War II Bretton Woods institution, uh, international rules-based system, uh, emergence of the international rules-based system. So international trade conflict within and among nations can occur due to power competition. The growing discontent towards globalization, the decline of global trade governance, which many would ask, what is the use of WTO under the current dispensation? So again, international trade conflict within and among nations can occur due to power competition, the growing discontent towards globalization, the decline of global trade governance, tensions from the rise of global value chains, domestic interest and institutions, trade deficit, and exchange rate misalignment. So these all, in some measure, contribute to the conflict within and among nations regarding trade. Furthermore, resistance to international trade and associated trade barriers may also arise due to concerns about job losses in domestic industries. I'm sure we've all heard that lately, and that cannot compete with cheaper foreign imports, as I've just explained, and fears of exploitation of workers in developing countries, environmental damage from production overseas, and the perception that trade agreements disproportionately benefit large corporations, leading to political pressure from affected workers and industries to protect their interests through trade barriers such as tariffs and quotas. More recently, countries, including the United States, have imposed tariffs on imports from countries accused of non-market economic policies and practices. These countries are accused of industrial subsidy to gain unfair market advantage. Note that subsidies cause a misalignment between price and production cost in the global economy, aka non-market policy. So when we say non-market policy, that's what it means. And this impairs the efficient, and non-market policies, that is, impairs the efficient operation of the free market system. 4, what is the globalization of trade? Hence, what is international political economy? Globalization of trade refers to the increasing integration of national economies worldwide through exchange of goods and services across borders, essentially meaning that countries are becoming more interconnected through international trade, facilitated by factors including technological advancements and reduced trade barriers, leading to global markets where products and services can be bought and sold freely between nations. International political economy is the study of how politics shapes the global economy and how the global economy shapes politics. We could literally see how this is playing out. So, the global economy of trade shaped, as one example, and many would argue, the election of the current Canadian Prime Minister, Prime Minister Carney, and the politics that informed his elections is now also framing and shaping his trade engagements with the United States and other countries. So this is a classic example of international political economy on how politics shapes the global economy and how the global economy shapes politics. The key focus in international political economy is on the distributive consequences of global economic exchange. Others take the view that IPE, or international political economy, is the study of political battle between winners and losers of global economic exchange. The fifth learning objective is what has been the role of the US and other governments and their economy since World War II, especially post-World War II. The United States has led the establishment of a rules-based international system, including global institutions such as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, the World Trade Organization, or WTO, and the United Nations, or UN, among others, that undergird the rules-based international order, at least traditionally has done so since the Bretton Woods institutions came to being, and until now. Number 6 learning objective is what developments have taken place over time to facilitate world trade and to remove impediments to trade imposed since World War II. The establishment of international and regional trade, finance, and trade regulators, including regional agreements such as the USMCA, otherwise known as the US-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement. These are some of the foundational frameworks that inform this week's learning activity. So let's conclude by reminding the class that next week we will discuss the barriers to trade. Rather than focus on the types of barriers that exist, we will instead focus our attention on how different constituencies nationally and internationally attempt to limit trade, even as there is broad agreement that trade is beneficial. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I am glad to open the floor to questions. And thank you. I will now turn off the recording and take questions and conversations as necessary.